Hello, everybody. Welcome to Halloween Evil Lives Live. I'm your host, Michael. I'm joined with my very special guest this evening, Kevin. He's Freddy too. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm happy to be here. I'm very excited about what's been going on. So anxious to let people know what's up.
So, would you like to give us a little bit of your background, how you got into Freddy's Nightmares and some of the Elm Street work that you've done?
Sure. Moved out to California, 21 years old, packed up everything in a van, drove out. That in and of itself was quite an adventure. And then, stumbled around a couple of odd jobs, odds and ends stuff. Did run into a lot of celebrities. It was just the way it was then. It was a very different culture. There wasn't this gonzo paparazzi running across the street, droves of people, like none of that. So there were a lot of people just out going about their day. You would just run into somebody at the grocery market or, the grocery store or wherever. So had a lot of encounters that way. One of the early jobs I had was delivering rental cars to the rich and famous. So picked a lot of people up from the airport, and gave them their fresh new Mercedes for the week. And then moved out to the valley after a major car crash on that job. And I used to go at night with my buddy evenings and skateboard at this school across the street that had been shut down. And one night we go over and it's all padded up. It's locked. There's a couple of vehicles there. And then the next day, there's a full blown movie production. And that turned out to be the movie Heathers. So we went over to ask what was going on. I mean, we saw food trucks and a bunch of girls and thought, something's happening. So went over and it turned out they were looking for more people that were high school age, and went to central casting. They gave us the number. I did about almost 3 weeks on Heathers. Then did a night or two on the Blob and got the call. They said, are you available tomorrow for extra work on Nightmare on Elm Street 4? So like every other job, yeah. I went that day. I got home that night and they called me and said that somebody had spotted me that day and they wanted to take a closer look at me, possibly double for Robert and then work as a stand-in for the other male talent, throughout the film. And would I be available for, a month, 2 months? And I said, well, sure. Any steady work was awesome. So I went in and, right off the bat, when I walked on the set, I saw a lot of people I knew from Heathers because they were there to, do whatever scene they were doing that day. Excuse me. And PA scoops me right up, takes me in an office, and I'm in a room with Rachel Talalay, and what I would find out were two wardrobe people. And they're kind of talking to me, feeling me out, just to make sure I wasn't a total asshole because they were looking at the possibility, bring me on board for however many weeks. And then, it's funny, they hand me a hat, and the one thing when I mention to people that they're really surprised about is I had not seen any of the Nightmare films up to that point.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, I was a horror fan, not like big, but I mean, we snuck in to see Halloween 3 times when I was a kid. And, I saw Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things on a little black and white TV growing up. And there's a lot of stuff that I gravitated to horror wise, but like a lot of other things. I knew, of course, who he was, and I knew the whole concept, but not really details. So at one point, I guess once they decide that I'm bearable, they start to break out wardrobe. And they hand me a hat, and they go, don't think about it, just put it on. So I just put it on, and I just felt like it wasn't quite sitting right. I wanted to adjust it, and for whatever reason, because I am right-handed, I happen to grab it with my left hand to adjust the brim. And I noticed that there's like a reaction in the room, but I have no idea why. Now in retrospect, I realize because Freddy that's the hand he'd use. He wouldn't use the gloved hand. Then they're looking for something else, and whoever it is says, well, just stand there. And I thought that was weird because I've been standing there the whole time. And somebody said, no, like yesterday. So I guess they saw something in the way I was standing at some point the day before. So I still don't know what they're looking for. And what I do, because it was the only move, so to speak, I kind of had was I turned my left foot pointing out, and that gave me a bit of a slouch on the right side. It was just a bit of a more relaxed stance, and that then was it. That was like the alarm bell went off. They're like, that's it. They're like, come back, get changed. They were leaving, going to get changed, meet Rachel in the office. Sat down with her, went over the paperwork. She gave me a brief rundown of what it was I'd be doing. But the interesting thing about that whole thing with the foot, and I have the story in the book, is that at one point I was out shopping. It's long before any of the nightmare stuff, when I was knocking around all the dead end jobs. I'm in the supermarket, and I was standing like that with my foot pointed out, not even knowing I was doing it. So all of a sudden I turn and look, and there's this girl there, and she says to me, "Do you dance? Are you a dancer?" And I have no idea what first off, she didn't pop out of nowhere. And before I have a chance to answer, she points at that foot, and she goes, "You have your foot turned." So I guess that's something dancers do, and that's the term for it. So then she proceeds to start ballet. She goes, "I'm a dancer," and she starts like pirouetting up and down the cereal aisle and dancing around. And I fall in love, and that lasts for 2 weeks because she's completely out of her mind. But from that point forward, I was standing like that every chance I had, waiting for another dancer to spot it and come up and start talking to me. But that didn't happen. What it got me, is Freddy instead of another dancer. But I start on the film, and I look back. I did the New Jersey Horror Con. I just did it a couple weekends ago, but the year before I did it, that was the first time I saw Danny Hotshot Hassel, as he is often referred to, at the convention. And I hadn't seen the guy since we wrapped filming, and I always got along with Dan. I had a great time with Dan. So I'm hanging out, talking with him. I took a couple pictures horsing around, with the gloves and stuff. And I realized when I'm there, and I'd forgotten, Dan's a full 2 inches taller than I am. And I was taller than the other male castmates. So that's when it dawns on me when I see Dan again. I'm going, I had always thought that they brought me on as a stand-in, and then maybe they were going to try some Freddy stuff. But you wouldn't hire a stand-in that's 2 inches shorter than the actor they're supposed to be standing in for, because the whole idea is you're supposed to mimic that actor as closely as you can for lighting and while they set everything up, because it could be an hour or more to set up a shot. So that's why you have the stand-ins do it versus talent. So I'm like, well, they wouldn't have hired me for stand-in for Dan. I'm 2 inches shorter than Dan is. And I'm taller than the rest of the cast. And that's when it kind of sunk in. I was like, this was specifically to mimic Robert on 4. And there was some stuff shot where I was in full Freddy gear and I was running that has never seen the light of day. Somebody had mentioned to me that they had seen it at one point putting together one of these box sets because they were someone connected with whoever had the rights at the time. I don't know, Warner or who have you. So some of that's out there somewhere. But I did do more tight stuff. One scene, actually, I have the one photo, and again, it's a story, but this would be in an arm rig. And then this went on to be footage that was used when the souls are coming out of Freddy. So
I remember that scene.
Yeah, wrestling against the wall, and there's some shots where you see like an overhead almost of these things coming out of his arm. And I was in that rig for that. And that's kind of what locked me in with the gig. Before that, it wasn't like people were going to find me to go do something. It wasn't like, oh, we're doing this Freddy thing, go find Kevin, that's why he's here. Because it was so chaotic. I mean, the entire shoot was very chaotic. And there was a lot of stuff going on all the time. A lot of guys had sort of a shop right there on set and on the sound stage. So they'd be toiling away, punching out foam molds of whatever and creating these effects like that arm rig. And, I might get called in there for 20 minutes to work with them while they try some things and do some fittings. Then I'd be pulled over and stand in for Dan for a scene or two. Then I'd get yanked to do something like that arm rig. And that arm rig, the first night I showed up for work as a stand-in was the junkyard. It was incredibly cold and it was really spread out. where they were actually filming most times, almost from, in most sense that I can recall, wherever we would be filming, typically you could look over and you'll see there are the trailers. You know, they're walking distance away from the set. But with the junkyard, everything was really spread out. You know, I refer to it as like a campus, because they had the maze of cars, but then they had a section with it where they're going to do the car stunt in the fire-breathing car. And then they have where the pit where the car falls on, you know, Freddy comes up out of the pit, the car falls on Freddy. So all these different things are set up, and then the trailers are like around the perimeter of that. So it was pretty spread out, and I was just kind of wandering around, freezing my ass off. And that's when the prop guys get a hold of me, and they saw me wandering by enough times and that I was cold, and had me come stand in their trailer. And they said, you know, you're going to have to insert yourself, because if you're not right there, like, they're moving. They'll just grab whoever and have them do it. And if they grab whoever too many times, they're going to go, well, what are we bothering with Kevin for? So when the opportunity came up to get in an arm rig, I was like, I want to be in this. I want to do this and definitely sort of show this is what I'm here to do. It's the old careful what you wish for, because I end up trapped in the thing probably close to 2 hours. Completely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I completely lost feeling and function of my right hand. There were things pinching on nerves. It was during a heat wave. There are people just all over me. There's a documentary, I believe it's called Never Sleep Again. I don't know if you're familiar with that one. Yeah, that was a lot of footage shot by Bill Forsh. And if you look in that, you'll see that particular, as they're shooting that scene. And you can see in between takes, Bill is literally holding my hand up, because I just couldn't even hold. I was so hyperextended because they want me out of the shot. They're just shooting the arm with these puppets coming out. You know, the two guys who are operating the puppets are basically, you know, on my shoulders. It involved a shop vac that was 2 feet from my head that was running constantly. It was torturous. I mean, it really was. But that locked me in then sort of as the glove guy. You know, I was willing to get in the trenches and suck it up and suffer through to get things done. And then that put me on 4, which was a grind. Afterward, I had to check out for a little while. So I actually went as far as to unplug my answering machine, which back then was verboten. I mean, if you were trying to do anything in Hollywood in the 80s and you didn't have your answering machine on, you were dead in the water. So, but I had to just, it really wrung me out working on 4. Yeah, that was a stressful situation. So when I plugged the answering machine back in, because now things are getting a little too crazy because I'm not working. You know, I mean, I had come from being on the set every day on Nightmare 4, and it would be the same routine. One of my buddies would call on a Friday night, hey, we're going here, we're going there. I was in no shit. If I was even home, you know, I was like, I didn't have much free time at all. I mean, you hope to get a day where you had the energy that, you know, you could do a couple loads of laundry and do some food shopping. Some of the guys used to joke that at the end of a shoot, they would just have a pile of dirty t-shirts, socks, and underwear because they just continuously bought new, because it was quicker than, you know, going through the trouble of doing laundry. So I plugged the answering machine in and I started getting calls for Freddy's Nightmares. And then went over. Luckily, the studio was only 20 minutes from my house. And being I'd already done the work on 4, you know, it was a fit. I mean, it only made sense. And I later learned that Robert actually told them, you know, you got to try to find Kevin. Because as a lot of hardcore fans know, you know, on Nightmare 2, they tried to use somebody else. Because they thought,
that didn't work out.
Yeah. No. And having gone down that road before, and I guess looking at his own schedule, you know, they were still riding high on the buzz with 4. So there was a lot of overseas stuff going on for Robert. They were already in pre-production on 5. He just had to know he's not going to be able to be there as often as Freddy was in the script.
Yeah, I was thinking about that because they have to pay him a lot of money to be on the set, but he can't be on the set all the time. So you got to have some kind of body double to do some of the elaborate scenes and stuff, stunts and stuff like that.
Yeah, because the show was very low budget. It's kind of it's slowly becoming my crusade to kind of clear up this misunderstanding regarding this series. And I see a lot of people online, and look, I get it. Some people love it, some people hate it. It was cheesy, it was this, it was that. We were never trying to compete with the movies. You know what I mean? And even if they wanted to, the budget and the time wasn't there. So a lot of it was meant to be very tongue-in-cheek, and a lot of it was meant to be funny. And I had a great time working. I mean, it was a grind. It was a lot of work. But it was a lot of the same people from Nightmare 4. And it was a much lighter atmosphere than working on 4. A lot of folks were kind of back and forth because they were pre-production on 5. And the thing I think that people miss about the series, and I missed it as well. Now, fortunately, I got this bit of information as I was writing. But I was at a Halloween-a-Palooza out in Iowa. Was the first time that hardcore fan walks up, and I always ask, do you know the movies, the show? And this guy said both. He said, and then he goes, the TV shows where I first saw Freddy.
Mm.
So the thing that I think people miss about the TV show, and I say this, and then I tell people, let me finish. But the TV show did more to propel the franchise than any of the movies, with the exception of the first one. And here's why. The TV show put Freddy in people's living rooms literally all over the world. And some of those living rooms were nowhere near a movie theater. There was no internet. There were no cell phones. This was also when VCR sales were very strong. So people had home VCRs. So now they could record the show and watch it as often as they wanted or whenever they wanted. They could show it to their buddies. They could show it to other people. And that was going on literally, all over the globe. Another piece of it that happened, which was sort of a happy accident, I guess, in the confusion of dealing with all these different affiliates or syndicates or whatever, syndication, whatever they call it, they were emphasizing to folks that this is for late night. This is late night stuff. But apparently not everybody got the memo because it did start to air in some places during the day. And I've spoken to people who said they saw it during the day.
That's what I was wondering, what time it came on. I live in the Midwest, so I think around 8 or 9 o'clock. So I think it was kind of be like a Tales from the Crypt anthology type series, Freddy's Nightmares. I think that's what they were going for.
Yeah, they were kind of, that was going on. I think that had already had, so they were biting off of that for sure, style-wise. And then again, targeting that later on, a little bit later time slot. But again, not everybody played it at that time. Some people were playing it, during what would be considered inappropriate times, which then caused an outrage in spots. But guess what? No such thing as bad publicity. So you've got this TV show now that is in some places that are nowhere near a theater. No longer you have to wait for a Freddy movie to see Freddy, and then it's only out for a few months. And now you've got to add the parents. So the parents here and look in on their kids, and they're watching, glued to the TV, waiting for Freddy. They're driving kids back and forth to school. They're talking about Freddy. Now that same parent goes out holiday shopping and sees all these toys in the store and goes, that's that guy they talk about all the time. And all of a sudden, Freddy starts popping up under Christmas trees. So all from the TV show. So the TV show really accelerated the global awareness of Freddy and really, really penetrated in regards to some of the audience that a movie would not, because folks simply were not near a theater, or maybe the theaters that were near them, and it just kind of occurred to me, but when you think of all these little spots where people try to keep their own little utopia maybe they wouldn't have shown, even if there was a theater in town, they wouldn't have shown a Freddy film. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're like, that's just not us. It's not like that here. But what comes over to TV, so now you've got a spot where perhaps somebody was trying to kind of keep that thing out, and they were able to penetrate even those spaces.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of the actors and actresses in the Friday Night series were from the Friday the 13th series. I recognize a lot of them from some of the Jason movies. I was surprised about that, but that's pretty cool. Kind of cool crossover.
Yeah, it was sort of a tight circle with the horror stuff because, and I've heard some of the other people who've worked on a production say it, but we really were like we were like a half a rung above porn. I mean, people weren't, I talk about it now, it's how many years later, and whether it be in an interview or somebody I'm talking to at a table at a convention, they'll go, oh, that must have been great. You were doubling for Robert. I mean, it's Freddy, man. And you must, like, as though doors are opening for me because of this. And the truth of it is, it wasn't like my opening line. You know what I mean? You weren't running around bragging that that's what you were doing. Somebody asked you what you were working on, sure. And I'm sure there were people bragging on it because they were heavy into what they were doing, and rightfully so. A lot of people did really accomplish some pretty wonderful stuff with really very little resources and just tons of ingenuity and experience. And so, yeah, it wasn't like what it is now. I mean, it wasn't anywhere near the fervor that it is now. Even just the whole horror genre then was not anywhere near what it is now. And that's why it's kind of odd to come into it so much after the fact. But what's cool is that I have brand new stuff. I have stuff people haven't seen. I mean, I had that one arm rig that I'd shown you, and that was from this. This is in between takes during the church fight when then all the souls are coming out. And that I was just offset. Yeah, it's between takes, and I would grab stuff like that a lot. This is one from Freddy's Nightmares. And you can see Robert's got the cigar.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah. That's when he did the Groucho Marx bit. So
were you the human version of Freddy, right? In the court scene?
Yeah.
Where they didn't show his face?
Yeah, what's odd with that one, that was the first episode we shot, and that was directed by Toby Hooper. Of course, Texas Chainsaw.
Texas Chainsaw, yeah, I was gonna say.
Now, I hadn't seen that movie either at the time. So
wow.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and I mentioned in the book that my naivete served me because I was only 20, I was 21, and I turned 22 while I was working on the show. So here I am at 21 years old. I'm in full Freddy costume, short of the makeup, and I'm in a bush, and I'm being directed by Toby Hooper. Come up out of the bush, turn this way, turn that way. Like, if I had been a huge fan of this stuff, or even a casual fan of this stuff, there's a way that might have, I might have gotten in my nerves and kind of thought about what I was doing in a way that would have prevented me from doing it as well as I did. And that's the other double-edged sword I'm working with is that, I joke with people, I say, if you already knew about me, like if you're a hardcore fan and you already knew Kevin Rudzinski, the reason you would know him, it most likely would be because you'd know him as a guy who did a shitty job trying to be Freddy on a TV show. You know what I mean? And that's why people don't really know of me, because I didn't do a shitty job. You couldn't tell it was me. You couldn't even tell I was there. Mm. Yeah. So I
was gonna say you couldn't, because I watched that episode and it blended so perfectly with Robert.
Mm-hmm. Now a lot of it, I give credit to the guys who edited, and they were able to where they spliced things and started to stop stuff. But I did have a sit down with Robert before we started filming. And again, this is when that sort of naivete served me again, is I'm sitting with Robert Englund. So now this is on the heels of Nightmare 4, which was just a rocket ship for the franchise. Now I'm sitting with the man and we're passing the glove back and forth. And he's telling me, no, not like that, like this. Do this, don't do that. Do that, don't do this. And if you don't, and then do this. So the idea was, as long as I stay within the guardrails he was setting up, and I didn't do anything he didn't want me to do, and I didn't do anything that he wouldn't do, and I wanted both of those things as well, that it would make it easier for them to edit it together. And it would also make it a bit easier on Robert when it came time for him to add some flourishes and stuff, because he knows basically the 3 or 4 moves that I've sort of stuck to. And there's a great consistency throughout the TV show. It's very hard to tell. There's a couple of scenes where it's just split seconds. They go back and forth, particularly when they would incorporate and cut in the glove close-ups, because I did all the glove close-ups on the show. And there's one I got to get familiar with, like, every episode. There's some that stick out. But in this one in particular, there's an actor that is suspended by ropes in like an operating room scenario. And Freddy, Robert's behind him. And the shot is the guy's on the hanging and Robert's here. But then they cut to close-ups of Robert petting the guy's head with the glove, of Robert sinking a hammer into the guy's thigh, again with the hand. And I look at it, and I was kind of in my head going, Robert, me, Robert, me, Robert, me. Like, I could see it. And the other thing that was interesting for me going through the series is I also did, they called them hand inserts for any of the, like, odd little things. If you needed a hand to flip a switch, if you needed a hand to do this, do that, turn a page, and I would get an extra $20 every time that I did one. So I'd have to fill out a voucher, and they'd have the scene number and the time of day and all that. But there's one real long sequence in the episode, I believe it's called The End of the World. And there's this whole sort of countdown to Armageddon, as though there's 2 guys who, have to come together in tandem and do a combination of things. And then, the atomic bomb is dropped from the sky. So the sequence is long. And what you see in frame is this hand, and it pushes a keypad for the code to get in. And now you follow the shoulder, press go. Now they're in a little setting with computers and all kinds, and they're flipping switches and flipping this and turning that, and then take a key and put the key in and turn it. And that's supposed to be the kaboom. And when I watched it, it came back to me, because I remember it was something I was really had to be super mindful of going into. A lot of the other stuff was very short clip. I grab somebody, although that took a lot of preparation so that no one got hurt. But this was a long shot, and I had to use my left hand the entire time, because of the way the set was built, so that the camera could be here and follow along with me and see a hand doing all these things. So I'm right-handed, and I'm, putting in a keypad, and I'm messing with these buttons. And then there's something, if you watch the episode, you'll see at the very end to put the key in, I kind of flip the key fob around in my hand. And that's because the way I grabbed it with my left hand just wasn't natural, and it wasn't in a position to just stick it in and go. So I do this little thing with the hand. There's lots of little tells. I'm working on a book right now, actually. Well, we're going to start. I've just got this one wrapped up. I'm going out with this one right now. But with Blake Best, who was my editor on this. And I always drop Blake's name because it was just, without him, it wouldn't be done yet, still to this day. He really did step up and, had offered to help. And early on, I kind of thought I was going to be able to swing this thing. And then I reached out for him for a little help. And then it was a little more. And then before he knew it, I yanked him on board completely. And he was getting texts at all hours about the craziest shit. But we did it. And now, because we'd also have talk, we talk, and the idea of a companion book for Freddy's Nightmares, which has been attempted. And from what I understand, the feedback wasn't so positive. And it kind of bothered me a little bit, because the people who did put it out had a podcast, and I'd reached out to them a bunch of times. So it's like, oh, this would be great. This is a perfect fit. And I wasn't really hearing back, and I was a little surprised. And then I guess maybe they already knew they had this book in the pipeline. But suddenly this book pops out, and I'm thinking to myself, well, they weren't there. I'm not quite sure how behind the scenes or whatever it's going to be. So Blake and I talked about it and decided we're going to put together a companion for Freddy's Nightmares. which would have some of my behind the scenes stories, behind the scenes pictures, and then the breakdowns for every episode in regards to who was on it. Because a lot of people came through Freddy's Nightmares.
Yeah, that would be really cool. And like I said, we'll be leaving the links down for your book and your social medias if people want to contact you for anything signed. It's always great to be in contact with people that are interested.
Yeah, I've got stuff on the site. I'm going to rotate that because I still find pictures, that I'd forgotten I had. And I found, interestingly enough, going back a few weeks ago, I found some strips of the old 110 negatives, which not everybody will remember, but they were very like orange coppery and came in little strips. You'd go to the drug fair or Photo Mat or wherever, and they developed these for you. And for the longest time, I didn't know what to do with this stuff, but I knew I should hold on to it. And now the technology is caught up. And I did a little experiment, and I really only used my camera phone, but you light it from underneath, you take a picture, then you put the picture into Photoshop, and you hit invert, and it basically develops the picture. I mean,
wow, that's cool.
Yeah, and now I've got these, negatives, which, I've got to go through and see what's in there. I found the one shot, which was me and Robert on the set of Freddy's Nightmares, where he's wearing a sign around his neck. It says Freddy Free. And that episode was about, this is the other thing, some subject matter on. This was people were trying to adopt kids. And there's a scene that basically looks almost like an animal rescue, where they have these dirty kids in these cages. And then when Robert comes in to do his bumper at the end of the segment or intro, outro, he's got a sign like the kids had on, and it says Freddy and then it says Free. So we're just offset from that shot and standing next to each other. He's got the sign on and I'm wearing the glove. So, there's two shots I have with Robert I'm really happy with, and it's that one. And then there's another one where we're both just in our sunglasses. He doesn't have the sweatshirt on, or doesn't have the sweater on. He does have the makeup on, and we're both just leaning against the wall. And then when I developed it, I saw he's actually flipping off like this in the picture. So that was one I was happy to find when I went digging into stuff to get ready for this book.
Would you like to tell us more about this awesome book that you have coming, or it's out right now for people to purchase? Would you like to tell us some more about it?
Sure. The ones right now, what I've got is a first run. The second run is I've already put the order in for, but the second run's going to have a different cover, a little bit different because the color translation didn't work out the way I had anticipated. Because I sent it in RGB instead of CMYK. The book was a whole learning curve. But the result is sort of an accidental variant. So there's a limited number that'll be this style. And what I went ahead and did was I hand numbered the back cover of the 100 that are in this form. And that's that sort of like official Freddy Do seal that I have. But this is loaded with pictures as well. I mean, this is one with Robert and Rennie on set, and then Robert behind the scenes on Freddy's Nightmares. So just again, I've got a lot of stuff nobody's seen. As long or as big a fan as people are, this is new stuff from a franchise damn near, or the film, an era, it's almost 40 years ago. So a lot of stuff is on the site. The book really wrung me out because, as I mentioned in the intro, the original concept was to put together a collection of behind-the-scenes stories and sell them at conventions. I was noticing there were people with books. I was in one convention setting where I had a cast member from one of the films on my right and another cast member from one of the films on my left. It was not four that they were from. And people are walking up, getting an autograph here, and then walking right past me and getting an autograph here, and then off they go. And the volunteer had said to me, oh, do you want to tell? I said, look, the word will get out, and then they'll realize. But there was a disconnect. And again, it goes back to the fact that, if you knew it was me, I was doing the job wrong. So I have to educate people on the fact that I was even there. So I sat down and just started putting together these behind the scenes stories. But there were a few in particular that were very intense for me as they unfolded. There's one scene, I believe it's the episode Cabin Fever, which takes place in the cabin of an airplane, a lot of the scenes. And then a gunman comes on and sprays the cabin with bullets. And in writing about that scene, I was like, I remember this was a rough day for me. There was a lot going on. And that's because of some experience I had with gunplay before I even started on Nightmares. So I said, I'm not really getting the intensity of why this was such a thing for me. And I'm like, well, it is because of these other things that happened, but I can't exactly now just go, oh, by the way, this was super heavy because this thing happened, and then wind back. So the way it started to take shape was I start off with stories from my first year in California. And there's some pretty traumatic events that took place. And then it kind of gives people a little bit more of an idea as to where my head was at when I was on the set of Nightmares, and Nightmare 4, and even on the Blob, because I had already been through so much. And now here I am, doing what I went there to do, but I'm so battle tested and battle scarred from, just working my way to get there, that there were some elements of it that really were, the word gets tossed around a lot, but and you didn't know it as that at the time, but like very triggering stuff was going on around me because of everything I'd been through before I even started on the film. So that's all in there. There's still even more stories from both sides, my first year in Hollywood and my time on the sets. And I think what I'm going to do is eventually, I don't know when, but get to like a special edition or deluxe edition where it's hardcover, full color photos, already signed, numbered, limited amount, with some additional stories and additional pictures. But knowing what it took to get this book done, and knowing I've got the other project with Blake, is right on deck. He's already sorted some preliminary stuff with that. When I get back from this weekend, he and I are going to lean into that a little bit more. This weekend, though, this will be a big weekend. I know this will air after that, but I'll be in Paris, Texas on Sunday for a one-day show, the River Runs Red Horror Fest. And I first will be Friday and Saturday in Carlisle, PA, doing the Carlisle Comic Con. And then I go right to the Harrisburg airport and fly out to Texas. My next door neighbor retired. He'd been living next door for 20 years, and he moved down to Texas. So he's going to come see me at that show. So after that crazy weekend wraps up, I'm going to go back with him, stay by his place for a day or two, and then fly back and get back on it with getting the book out there and stuff. But the other big piece, again, by the time this airs, it will have already happened, is there are two people that I know. One was my volunteer at the New Jersey Horror Con. He was at my table. And then another guy that I met through the Facebook page that I have. And both of them are going to be bringing copies of the book to their meet and greet with Robert in Kentucky. So
Awesome.
if all goes as planned this weekend, they will be handing him a copy of the book. And that's when it's going to get I'll be getting a little anxious until I kind of hear back one way or the other. Busy guy for sure. But he doesn't live in Kentucky, so I'm sure he's got an airplane flight he's going to have to get on at some point. Plenty of time to do some reading. Plenty of time to do some reading. So
I see his autograph lines are just incredibly long. I give him a lot of credit that he has patience with everybody.
Yeah, he was always super cool that way. A lot of people will ask, what was it like working right? Everything was really, when you hear it that many times, it's kind of like even with the negative. Sometimes you'll hear a negative thing over and over, and you tell yourself, well, you got to believe. You hear so many people say it. And with him, it's the opposite. It's always positive stuff. Everybody says something positive about his interactions with people. And even on set with Freddy's Nightmares, and I mentioned briefly in the book that he wasn't on set every day. A lot of what I would do is we would prep what they were going to shoot with him. So they would have me, because again, we were the exact same shoulder height, what they referred to as hat height, which meant when we both put the hat on, it was the same height. And I would run through these intro and outro bits until they had it down cold. And then Robert would come in for his one day, and they would just shoot enough for a handful of episodes. So we might be shooting things for an episode 4 episodes ahead. And then the regular crew would be doing something for that week's episode. So sometimes we'd split off, they'd do something on location, and then they'd make that a day that we were doing all the specific Freddy stuff, back in the studio. But getting back to the point, it seemed like the days that Robert was going to be there, that, suddenly there were a couple of people who'd be visiting the set, whether it be, the cousin of the guy who works in the front office, or the friend of the caterer who happened to be stopping by. There were just some people who seemed to have a reason to be there that day, which was fine. And they'd make their way to Robert at some point and be introduced. And he was always, would spend whatever time he had, chatting with people, taking some pictures and stuff. I had one buddy who flew in to see me when I worked on the show, and he got some cool pictures with Robert. So he's always been gracious with his time. And they say that sometimes that's why the line is what it is, because he's kind of getting a little chatty with each person who comes through. But as long as my two guys
experience.
Oh yeah. As long as my 2 guys get in there, at least one of them is able to get that book to them, it'll be mission accomplished for me next weekend. Well, it's this weekend. It's already days away.
I'm sure he'll cherish it, because he likes all this. When people bring him stuff like that, he just loves it. I've watched the videos on YouTube, and
yeah, he the other is, and I think about it, I think that time and that particular time and place for the franchise may have been possibly, I don't know, because I wasn't even involved in season 2 of Freddy's Nightmares. I didn't even know they made a second season. But I've got to think that possibly Nightmare 4 and then Freddy's Nightmares, and again, it's just an assumption, is that it's one of the last times that there was still some fun to it for him, because there's got to be a difference between putting all that on, for the 4th movie and putting it all on for the 7th movie. You know what I mean? So I think it was still a little bit earlier on in the trajectory of it all. And that was really when it just started. I call it the kissification of Freddy, because it got to be like Kiss, where Freddy was on everything. I mean, I remember, it's funny because every now and then I'll find something at a garage sale. I picked up some Freddy chopsticks, and then I also found a Freddy fondue set. So it's like, instead of forks, you've got like little gloves. They're supposed to be gloves. They don't look anything like the gloves. But of course, it's on a card, and then that blister card has all the artwork they licensed to sell these Freddy fondue forks.
Remember the Freddy folders when I was in school that said "Sweet Dreams, Alice" on them? I remember those. I went to school in the 80s and 90s, so
yeah. I mean, the image of Freddy was just everywhere. It was really, and again, that goes back to the part the TV show played as well, is that it drove that awareness that people knew, and then it created a market for a lot of the stuff that sold. Because again, it was very different. It wasn't like, you'd release a movie and it's still, unless it was a colossal juggernaut of a movie, I mean, you were in the theater a few months, and then it was gone, VCRs were just starting to happen. So to get that kind of awareness and exposure, where you're reaching these far-flung corners of the world, you could only really do with TV. And again, I'll get on every now and then, and I'll comment on Facebook, like, we weren't trying to be like the movies. We weren't trying to compete with the movies, because we knew that just couldn't happen. It just wasn't going to happen. We had a lot of fun with it. That first episode, and it was one of my actually, I say it was my first kill. But the cop is walking around outside the house, and he's eating the chicken, and then Freddy comes out of the bushes and kills him. And if you watch it, you'll see that there's no scream. The cop never makes a noise. And, you know, I put it in the book. I think I'd said, okay, let me get this straight. You're eating chicken, walking around the house, and burnt to a crisp, psychopathic killer jumps out of the bushes, and you don't scream. You know, nothing.
I thought it's interesting, the Freddy vision. Did you see that? It's like Freddy vision when he makes that kill.
Oh yeah. They do an effect, and then also now he's gutting you. Still no scream. And the reason for that was we were already starting to go over the time that we were allowed to shoot, like we were permitted for, and we were in a neighborhood. So we were running behind, and it was far too late to have some guy screaming like he's being killed in the middle of his residential neighborhood. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm sure they meant to put it in post and then didn't. But if you watch it again thinking that, you'll go, oh, yeah, that's right. And the other is, you know, they stab this guy, and then you see his feet. And you see the plate land, and literally ketchup is squirted on it. And that's what they did. Because, again, we were running late, and things were just crazy. And we knew it looked crazy, and laughed. I remember laughing when they shot it because it just looked so ridiculous.
I thought it was hot sauce.
Yeah. So now
I thought they pour like hot sauce on it quick or something.
Yeah. Now the feet that they drag out of the shot for that was me. Those were my feet. I was still wearing the Freddy sweater.
Oh.
Yeah. They just took the boots off me. They put the shoes on, and that's the kind of stuff that I would do. You know what I mean? If they needed an indescript arm or a foot, or, you know, shoot somebody from the back or something, you know, I would jump in and do that stuff too. And I also stood in for all the male talent that came through on Freddy's Nightmares. And, you know, that's the other thing about the series too. There's a lot of people on there that you wouldn't know to be on a series like that. I mean, Brad Pitt did an episode, Jeff Conaway, who was Kaneki in Grease, of course, on Taxi. Mariska Hargitay did an episode. Lori, I forget her name now. She went on to do soap operas and stuff. There were a lot of people that came through because it was, you know, there were a lot of little shows like that. And as you're struggling, trying to come up as an actor, you know, you go and read for these smaller productions. And sometimes one pops for you, and then you show up and do it. And we had a lot of people come through that went on to do some big stuff.
So you said you were willing to fill in as Freddy again if they start doing the movies again.
Well, you know,
as we know, Robert has aged, and
yeah, the interesting thing is it's one of those conversations that comes up almost regularly. You know, every few months somebody will do it almost as just a teaser to get people going and go, oh, who should play Freddy? And then they start throwing, you can't do it, this one can't do it. And people, well, nobody could ever do it. There's nobody does it like Robert does it. There's nobody, and sometimes I'll have fun with it, and I'll jump into the thread, and I'll throw up a video clip of me from that first episode, and there's a fairly long sequence where I come down a set of stairs, I come down another set of stairs, I grab a doll, I squash it against the wall, I look in a room, I look in another room, I walk through the boiler room, I pick up the glove, and I'll put that up, and I'll go, not Robert. You know, and people, what are you talking about? I go, it's me. I mean, if they're looking for somebody to do the job, I've already done it. I mean, I did the job. You know what I mean? And people didn't know that it wasn't Robert. So, and it worked. I mean, they were able to cut the two together, and that was without the technology that we have today. So, is it possible to do something? Maybe Robert voices it, you know, and I'm just doing the movement of it. And I'm sure the makeup could be done in such a way it would look. And I wore the makeup, you know, without major alteration. The other thing is odd is that, you know, I mean, I worked on that when I was in my 20s. It was almost 40 years ago. But just through the way life happens, I had some things come up, and I just got on a major health kick like 2 years ago. So I'm actually at the same weight that I was at. I'm in the same shape I was when I did it the first time, which is kind of bizarre that this would come around as, you know, at least a question mark. Because then the next piece would be, well, is the guy even capable of doing it at this point? I mean, he's 60 years old. But I'd be able to do it. Now we just need to get people to start campaigning for it and see if we can make it happen. But again, with the technology they have now, and there's a couple of things to the walk and how he carries himself as Freddy that I watch fan films, because there's a lot of well-made fan films where they've got a really great, costume. Everything looks cool. But there are a few key things that people are missing. And I think it's because they go in, let me just say, they go into it too macho, because I guess they're thinking the mindset of a crazed killer. So they're always real big and macho. And that's kind of something you don't need. And takes away from sort of the overall visual when it comes to authenticity with the original and what Robert did. And I also knew from the very start on Nightmare 4 that they were not going to use my voice. Like, I knew that was not going to happen. So in wanting to keep the job, because again, on Nightmare 4, those prop guys told me, you better start putting yourself in there, or if they start feeling like they don't need you, because it's a low budget movie. So if things start to get tight and they start looking around like, what can we get rid of? And they look at me and they go, well, yeah, but that's the guy who's supposed to do the ride. They go, yeah, but he hasn't done any. We already shot a bunch of stuff and he wasn't around, or he was doing this, he was doing that. So-and-so put the glove on and looked great. We don't need a guy just to. So locking that in was always a thing. And I thought to myself, well, I'm not going to speak as Robert. Really, all I have to go on is to move and make it look like I am Robert. So I would just, whenever he was around, I was studying just how he does the slightest of things, just if there was anything I might pick up on. And there would be some things. I might see him standing at the catering table before he gets in makeup, and he's tossing a couple things down his pie hole. And I notice some kind of trait in the way he holds something, or the way, and I just kind of log it. And then we'd shoot a take where he is Freddy and he might do some flourish or something. And I go, that reminds me of how I saw him grab the whatever. And I just kind of make a note of it, that it was kind of something from his personal posture that also carried into the character, because there was some of that. But it was, it was a fun run. I almost got killed on the set of Nightmare 4. Yeah, there was a bit of an oversight, and but that's a longer story. But I didn't, you know what I mean? And that's kind of how it was treated. Really, it was sort of, if I was to have gone, hey, I could have got killed, people would have been like, yeah, but you didn't, and we got a movie to make, so keep moving. But again, this will be after the fact, but at other shows as well, because I'll have all kinds of shows coming up. There's just so much I know that people just don't notice or aren't aware of, or don't think to look for in either the series or the movie. And just a couple quick nuggets to drop are in Nightmare 4, when Allison walks up to the theater and there's the woman in the ticket window, just minding her own business and just kind of take. Her name was Dana, and that was a wardrobe girl. So they just wanted, do you want to? She's like, sure. The short order cook in the diner behind Alice, you'll see there's a guy back there cooking, doing his thing, all grisly. And that's Jim. And Jim was the prop master. So Jim was the prop guy. Then on Freddy's Nightmares, there's loads of that stuff. There was one guy in particular, he was the camera dolly. His name was Dog Thomas. And Dog did a lot of walk-on stuff on Freddy's Nightmares. There is an episode where the set is a talk show and a guy comes out in drag as a woman with the real dart, and that's Dog. And he did so many quirky little walk-ons on Freddy's Nightmares. It was crazy. There's also a blooper in Nightmare 4 that most people have not caught. And the story behind that was I showed up. I'm talking to Dana, the wardrobe girl, because that was always my first stop when I got to set. Because if they had to put me in or out of Freddy stuff, where is it, who has it, what other shot, then to you, So I'm talking with her, and Rennie Harlan comes over and he's dragging this kid by one of the Letterman jackets. And I recognize the kid from working on Heathers. So he comes over to us and says to the wardrobe girl, he's like, "What is this?" And she goes, "Well, it's a Letterman's jacket." And he goes, "Same as Dan." She goes, "Well, they're on the same team." And he says, "Boring. It's boring, same jacket. I need a different jacket." So she goes, "Well, what kind of jacket?" And then he looks at me and he just points at me and he goes, "This jacket." And I just bought this new jacket. It was like the second time I wore it to set. And she looks at me and goes, "Hey, you're going to have to get in the varsity jacket later because you're double as Dan. Can we just use your jacket for the shot?" So I go, "All right, sure." So they filmed that night. We filmed all the exteriors for the Craven with the pickup truck the same night. So that same night, we also filmed the repeats where Dan and Alice keep jumping in the truck over and over. So that night, what they filmed before we lost light, so it was like late evening hours, was Dan and his buddy pull up in the red truck. They get out of the truck and they walk into the diner. So if you look, you'll see this kid gets out. And he's got on my gray and black jacket, which actually I had right here. I held up this, yeah. So it's this sort of sweatshirt jacket with the hood, and you'll see he comes out of the truck. He's got this jacket on, that jacket. But then when they pick up the shot on the interior where they walk into the diner and up to Alice, he's in a different jacket. So what happened was they shot the exterior using my jacket, and it was about a week later I see on the call sheet that we're filming the interiors the next day, and nobody asks me about my jacket. Most likely continuity would have taken pictures of the kid in the first jacket. So what they're referencing is the varsity jacket, which is what the kid is wearing when he comes through the door. But I knew. So I start thinking like, well, if they don't use it, then it might be in the film like a little, maybe it won't make it in, maybe it will. I didn't want to piss anybody off, so I said, let me bring the jacket to set. If somebody asks, then I can run and get it, and I'll be a hero. So they don't ask, and it ends up in the film. And then the capper on that story is that if you watch the film, you'll see that as the kid comes through the door, if you look close enough, you'll see it's not the same jacket. And if you look even closer, you'll see it's not even the same kid.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. And I talked to the kid that was wearing my jacket because I knew him from working on Heathers. He came to do an episode of Freddy's Nightmares. And I said to him, "Hey, what happened to you that night or that day?" They were filming the interiors on the diner. And he said, "Oh, yeah, no." He said, "I booked 2 weeks worth of work as a featured extra on Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead."
Oh.
So he ended up working on that. And that's kind of what was happening then. They were putting together all these sort of low budget movies. And it was the same, 30, 40 of us that were playing these high school age, kids. I could go through a lot of those movies, the Blob, Heathers, the Nightmare on Elm Street stuff, that Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, a couple others where I could literally go, see that kid leaning against the locker? Yeah, look, he's the same kid over here in Nightmare on the Football Field. See him now. He's also the guy over here in the doctor's office in this one. Because we were all just bouncing around to these movies. And, at Heathers at the time, I didn't even know if that was ever going to make light of day. And that originally was really, I think the first time it was seen was over in a Cannes Film Festival. And then it got picked up steam and came over and got a distributor.
Nice. Is there any prop gloves you want to show before we close out here? Anything you want to show?
I packed, because I'm starting to pack my stuff. I might have to jump off shot for a second. Yeah, I've got it here.
No problem.
Because I'm just starting to round up all my stuff for the show. This one is my man Rudy Salazar at Metal Fingers. It made this one for me. This is the Consafe glove, so the blades are plastic. This will be the one that I fly with.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, and this is also the one because we do have local shows. I can bring both, So during selfies, I'll ask folks if they want to wear a glove, and then sometimes we'll both have gloves on, and we can kind of monkey around a little bit, and it's fun. But Rudy does just a really great job of, and I'll take one shot. I'll look and see if my other one is handy, because it might only be a few steps away. Just let me try real quick. If not, I'm going to have
No
to
problem.
do it for next time, but I might be able to find it right here. Yep. So this one is in fact metal blade glove.
Oh, nice.
And again, Rudy really does an amazing job with these gloves.
Yeah.
And this actually has,
Yeah.
I don't see, there's a mule stamp. You might not be able to see it, but that's how you know it's actually of the era, which was weird because I happened to notice in Facebook Marketplace, some guy was emptying out his stuff and he had 2 pairs of these Wells Lamont they were old and they were still on the card. You know, you hang them when you're selling them. And he was like getting rid of these old gloves. And I looked and they had that stamp on it, which again, I don't know if there's a way to see it on this. I'll try again, but there's like a mule stamp.
That's pretty sweet.
That's stamped in it, but that's only the ones that are actually from the 80s, you know, which were the ones that they used. So I was able to actually come across some of those. And it was funny because this glove in particular, when I had Rudy make it, I told him, I said, you know, you don't have to get crazy with the detail. I said, because I'm going to use it for cameo videos and stuff and really just beat it up. And, but he only knows one way to do it. And that's 100% all the way. And he always does a killer job. So he sent me this.
Yeah, that looks like the real ones.
Yeah, these are the full blown. I mean, these guys work off templates that started from somebody that had worked on the show that had these templates. I'm always getting questions from people that are big glove aficionados because they'll see a picture of me and go, well, is this from that, from that, from this? I'll be honest with you, they give me a glove, I put it on. You know, I mean, that's the way I saw it. And I can't count how many times Robert would step off set and the glove would be so soaked with sweat. It was like a wet noodle. 2 guys had to hold it open while I put my hand in it. Then it would sit overnight. Maybe it'd be 2 days before I do another glove shot. Now I get the glove back. It's crinkled and dried up like a potato chip. And there were so many mornings or the start of the day where I would put a glove on and think to myself, that's the last day for this glove. But they made
Thanks a lot, Kevin, for coming on tonight. And once again, we'll leave the links below for your book and your social media so fans can reach out for you. And thanks for sharing all your stories and experiences. We appreciate it tonight.
Absolutely, man. I had a good time. Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. Have a good night.
Sure thing.
Have a good night, everybody.